the big news, Johann van Graan will leave Munster at the end of the season after initially signing a new contract in the summer. Now he's revoked a clause to leave. Alan, what do you make of this whole Johann van Graan and Munster situation?
Well, first of all, I think somebody needs to look at these clauses, these 6-month clauses, and get rid of them. You sign a contract, that should be it. I think, obviously that gives comfort to both sides. And if a coach wasn't, was a complete disaster and it wasn't working out, maybe it gives the RFU an option to release him after that 6-month period. But I think it's disappointing. It's some Munster fans, and I said this a few times over the years, that there's an impatience there. They haven't won a trophy since 2011, and there's an expectation that they should be winning trophies, and that's good to have that expectation, because it probably keeps a little bit of pressure stirring all the time that you've got to compete and a desire and a drive to be at the top table. But I think we've seen some change in the last couple of years in the way the team have been playing. Not consistently. We've seen it in sporadic bursts in certain games where the attack and the overall attack, not just the backs, I think the approach has been is brilliant to watch. But we've seen a lot of games where it's been difficult watch, particularly in semi-finals, finals. Most notably, probably that league final last year against Leinster, where Munster just underperformed and never really fired a shot. So we've seen positive signs and we've seen some, frustrations, I think. But overall, I think Johann van Graan has been very popular in the dressing room. I think he's a very decent man, respects people and was popular. On the outside, I think, as I said, that frustration. And I think a little bit of what I'm hearing is that some of that frustration has kind of seeped into Johann this year, maybe with the fans, and we're hearing some kind of frustrations behind the scenes. That's just been reported on some articles. So that's probably tipped the balance. And at the end of this season, it'll be 5 years that Johann will be there. And if Munster don't win a trophy this year, that's 5 years without a trophy. If he signs a new contract, potentially, the guy could be there 7 years. So players are like, our coaches are like players. Of course, you hope for loyalty and you expect loyalty from people when they sign contracts, but it's a business and that's just a reality. And it's unfortunate for Munster now that they've got to go and look again, lose a little bit of continuity. Larkham announced he was going a couple of weeks ago. Now the head coach, Graham Rowntree, is staying on, I think, which is a really positive step. But it's more uncertainty that's probably... Munster just have seemed to be in the headlines the last couple of weeks between COVID, Stephen Larkham, COVID, and now Johann van Graan, and the miracle performance on Sunday. The unthinkable happened on Sunday in Wasps. We'll talk about that later. So it's been very, very strange, and it's frustrating that he's leaving. And I think the timing of Bath announcing a day after saying that they're signed a player has irked some people in Munster.
Matt, as a former coach, what do you make of it all? He is off to Bath. They sit at the bottom of the Premiership, not in great shape at all. Were you very surprised, Matt, or not at all?
A bit of both, to be honest. Bath are a mess. So there's only one way for them to go, which is up. They've been awful, to be honest with you, but they've been pretty bad for a long, long time. And there's been pretty much a chain of coaches go in there and not get success. And the question you've got to have about Bath is who's driving the ship? Is it the owners or owner rather, or the coaches? So that Bath's a separate issue, and it's a tough place to go. They were once a magnificent club, once a powerhouse of English rugby. They're not anymore. So Johann's going there with his work well and truly cut out. I would go into bat for him a little bit as a coach, because when you sign a contract, usually it's totally on the side of the employer as a coach, and usually the contracts are you can be sacked with 3 months' notice for no reason. You don't get to do everything right, but if they just decide you're not doing a good job, you got 3 months and you're out the door. So the fact that Johann's got a little bit in there going his way as well, good on him. And look, I think it may have run its course. I agree with Quinny. The expectations at Munster around the team, they're unrealistic. And he has done a lot of good, and that team has come forward. He's rebuilt and done a lot of positive things there. They haven't got a trophy, and that's a big thing for the Munster faithful. And I get that. I'm not trying to make an excuse for it. But Johann did a good job. But I think 5 years at the end of this year is enough for him and could be enough for both sides. I think it could be a positive for Munster because the rebuild, the foundations of the rebuild have been laid and they're pretty good. We saw these young guys come out last week and really perform. So there's some good quality players coming through the system. I think what Munster don't have, and they did before with Declan Kidney and so on, is someone from the province that understands the culture and the people and understands the players the way Declan did. Now, Declan wasn't a technical coach in any sense of the word, but he also had great players. If you look at Leinster, they've got Felipe, Conopani, Emmett Farrell and Leo Cullen, who all played for the club for considerable periods of time and know the club inside out, and in Emmett's and Leo's case, have been at the club for 25 years. So that's what Munster doesn't have, and it'd be nice for them to try and go down that path. Now, where they go, Ronan O'Gara is the obvious case, but Ronan, from what we hear, is staying, and I haven't spoken to Ronan, I don't have any contact with that, is staying at La Rochelle. So it's who comes in and builds on Johann's great work that hasn't yielded a trophy, but if they can build on it and get a trophy, then it can be a plus. It's probably, in my opinion, I come from this different angle from Alan. I think it could be a blessing for the club in the next 12, 24 months.
Quinny, Matt mentions Ronan O'Gara there. You definitely probably will have spoken to him. What is his situation? Will he come back, Quinny? Or is it too soon?
I can release some breaking news. Yeah, he's after taking the job and he signed a 10-year contract, and Paul O'Connell is signed 10 years as well. He's left the Irish job. I'm going to be the new manager.
I thought there'd be a gig in there for you somewhere.
No, it's I don't know. It's at the end of the day, Rog. He signed a contract last year as head coach for 3 years with La Rochelle. So, he's involved in a project there that I suppose there's a couple of elements to this. If Munster wanted him, can he get out of the contract? Number one. Number two, does he want to get out of the contract? And is he interested in the job? I'm sure Munster would like. There is no doubt that there's certain times in your life that opportunities present themselves, and I think you have to look at them and weigh up the options and make a decision then and back your decision. Throughout all our lives, we make decisions and sometimes we regret things. And so I don't know. I think it's a very complex situation. And for Rog to suddenly say, I'm going to take the Munster job, even if he wanted to, there's legal ramifications there. He has a contract. I don't know if there's any sort of release clauses in his contract, but I don't know. I think he'll have to digest this. There's headlines in the papers in France that he's been linked with the job. So, look, he'd be a brilliant choice. I think he's been away for a number of years now, as has Mike Prendergast. Mike has been away 9 years, Rog 7 or 8 years. They've garnered a lot of experience and involved in different environments, different teams, and they're two Munster men through and through. And I'm sure they'll be heavily linked, and I'm sure Munster will have them on their radar. But I think it's a big job for lots of coaches throughout the world. I think a lot of people will have an interest in this. We've had a lot of situations in Munster where we've propelled coaches onto international jobs afterwards. Tony McGann, Jim Williams, Alan Gaffney, and that's no disrespect to the boys. But when you're if you coach a team, any of the Irish provinces now, I think you'll put yourself. Look at what Pat Lam did with Connacht, linked with a lot of international jobs. Took the job in Bristol, signed a massive contract there. So the thing with Munster now is, I think they need a little bit of stability. There's been a lot of change in the last number of years, and that's the nature of the business, maybe. If you get something right and it's continuing, and Leinster have shown that in the last number of years. I think Stuart Lancaster has been linked with so many jobs, but Leinster have managed to convince him and keep him on board, and he's treasured there, and has done a wonderful job. And Matt mentioned Felipe as well, and Leo steered the ship there very well. So not alone from a player point of view, from a coaching point of view, they have stability, and they're probably an envy to a lot of clubs. But it's a very complex business, professional sport. And I think Johann has done a good job. And I agree with Matt. He's laid a lot of foundations. Part of me thinks there's one more step here. And maybe we'll see that in the next 7 months. And getting someone, I just hope that it doesn't destabilize things a little bit and cause frustrations with the fans or players internally that he's leaving. It can be a tricky situation when you announce a coach is leaving. So look, it's something that Munster fans are get excited about if the likes of Ronan O'Gara are coming back there. But I don't know. It's there's a lot of moving parts to that, and who knows? And if Munster really want him, they maybe they will move heaven and earth to get him. He'd be brilliant. I think you can just imagine the excitement from supporters, and I think he wouldn't be a kind of a nostalgic appointment, if you like. I think he's proven himself now, albeit not as a head coach for a long period, but he's a wealth of knowledge, and they need to get the right person. I think lots of people throughout the world. Maybe Matt Williams will put his CV in as well and have a go for it. But look, there'll be a lot of coaches interested in this job.
Matt, no doubt you're getting that CV polished up. Matt, it is a big job. Is it the right time for Ronan to take the job if he was offered it, Matt? There'll be plenty in for it, won't there?
There will be. It's look, Munster are one of the great clubs of the world. There's no two ways around that. And as Alan said, they've launched a lot of coaches further on, and that's a negative in some aspects for the club. I really think that if it's possible, they need one of their own. They need Paul or Ronan, Dutchy Holland, in who's doing such a good job coaching in Wellington in the Super Rugby series. They need someone who is one of them. And look, I was at a big reunion on Saturday with a whole lot of guys I coached 20 years ago, and we're all talking about what a great position Leinster are in. And part of that is because we believe there's people running the club that understand the club's DNA and understand what they have to do to play well and how that's happened over 2 decades. And when they played well, they've done it. When they haven't played well, they haven't done it. And I agree with Alan. There is another step for Munster. I think it's another couple of steps. But if they could get one of their own in, that would speed the process up. Now, Ronan, to me, I sat next to him in the Virgin Media Studios for 3 or 4 years now. He's got a great mind, great thinker of the game. He's got his experience. He's been at Racing. He's gone down to Canterbury in New Zealand, and now he's a head coach at La Rochelle. And so Ronan is ready for Munster. But Ronan's a very loyal dude, and I really respect that about him. And he's got a handshake with a president in La Rochelle who's been very good to him. So I can't comment on whether Ronan will come or should come. But I do know he would be a good man for the job. I think he's the best man for the job. Because being a head coach is so different to being an assistant coach. So if you're an assistant coach somewhere and you step into the head coach's role, it's a different universe. And that's why some guys are just genius assistant coaches, like Stuart Lancaster, but maybe aren't as good as a head coach, because the requirements on leadership and what your skill set are very different. And Ronan has had experience at both, but being the head coach in charge of contracts, running staff, the whole complexity that comes with you dealing with, you're managing up the chain, not just down the chain to your players and stuff. You've got to manage up to your CEO and your board. And that is really hard. And that's time consuming. And then you've got the other part, which everyone forgets. Ronan's got a family. They're settled in a very nice place in France. Does he want to uproot them and move them back to Ireland? And many of his kids have never lived in Ireland. So they've been, from in Paris and New Zealand and now back to France. Where do you go with your family? So the moving parts, as Quinny said, are huge. On the simple question, is Ronan ready? Without doubt. Without doubt, he's ready.
Interesting stuff. Quinny, as a Munster man, do you want to see an all Munster ticket in that coaching staff for the next group?
I'd like to see some Munster involvement, I think. And we saw, look, we've seen it before. And Munster did try with Jerry Flannery and Felix and Axel. Times are a little bit different then. I think some of the young players that we're talking about now and that we're seeing and we're getting excited about were probably in their very, very, very early stages. Some of them not even heard of at that stage. So I think the depth of the squad wasn't as strong in those previous years. I would like to see. I'd love to see ROG come back there. I'd love to see Paul come back there. I'd love to see Jason Holland as well, as Matt said. Mike Prendergast. These are guys. These are our own guys that I think sometimes you can overemphasize the DNA and culture of a club and not understanding it. And I don't mean that disrespectfully in any way to Matt. I think it's the same as overseas players coming into a club. And I can name a few that were just unbelievable with Munster. They became Munster. Jim Williams, John Langford, Dougie Howlett, Topoki, Maffey. These guys will always be remembered, Jason Holland, as Munster guys. Rob Henderson, even last week, I'm speaking to him, and I'm asking him, what's his connection with Wasps and Munster? And, well, he said, I haven't been to a Wasps game since I retired, and I've probably been to 30 Munster games. Munster grasps hold of you, and particularly if you come in as a player or a coach. And the same with all the coaches. Alan Gaffney, even though he was with Matt at Leinster as well, and he's a real connection to Irish rugby. He was involved with the Irish team as well. But Tony McGann and Jim Williams and these guys who coached here, they get engrossed in it. And Johan will be remembered as well as a Munster man. But I think if the people are ready and they're your own and there's a 50-50 call, you got to go for someone who will, Roger will excite the fans. He will really excite the whole place. And look, maybe it's hypothetical talking about it, that it may not happen. It's a very tall order because, as we said, with contracts and all that kind of stuff, is it the right time? Who knows what the right time is, Stuart, in your life? You've got to sometimes make things happen and make it the right time. But of course, I'd love to see him come back. I'd love to see Mike Prendergast come back too. And Matt knows this. Mike is so well regarded in France. He was at the bottom of the pile and the top. He worked his socks off, doesn't have the same profile as Rog or Paul. Went to Grenoble, in a dogfight there, ended up in Iona, another dogfight, but played brilliant attacking rugby and players loved him. They loved his approach. They loved his dynamic with people. And obviously it didn't work at Stade because Paul himself left there and Paul left first and Heineken Mayer and there was a lot of uncertainty there about the club. But Mike nearly was involved in the European Racing side who won Europe 2 years ago. They were an absolutely brilliant side and probably should have beaten Exeter in that final. They've been knocking on the door for years. Whether they will be or not this year, they've a fair bit of change. But he's someone who deserves a shot or deserves to be in the mix anyway.
Yeah, you mentioned Mike Prendergast there, Quinny. He's certainly done his time, as you say, or at Grenoble, or and then Racing, even on Friday night there against the Saints. Like, Racing were just unbelievable, and the backs were brilliant. And he just seems to, from the outside, give the players the opportunity to go and with a bit of freedom and play ball.
Yeah, and as I said, I speak to players when you're on the road the last few years, and you talk to guys, and he's very well respected. and they like his attitude and they like his philosophy around attack. So I think maybe the overall shape of the team is something that probably has frustrated me at times. And sometimes, Matt will know this as a coach, sometimes that's down to personnel as well. You can't just turn kind of forwards who are not have that open vision and that natural flair and footballing skills. They've got to do their primary job first, which is scrum, line out, breakdown, all that kind of stuff. But if you can get players like look at Tyke Furlong, what he can do with the ball in his hand. His lines are running even when he doesn't get the ball. It's a perfect scenario. That's why he's the best tight end in the world. But if you can get your forwards really understanding shape in attack, where they stand, lines they run, being an option in that front line, all that kind of stuff, it adds to your attack. And we saw that in November with really good continuity from Ireland against particularly in that All Blacks game. And it's about developing that. So I think the next step for me is developing that, not going away from Munster's tradition of being a team that takes you asunder up front, or at least makes you work your socks off as a forward pack. And if you don't, you're going to be in for a long day. That's always kind of been Munster's approach. And I love that when I play for Munster, whether we went 20, 30 yards with them all, the crowd loved that. So it's not that Munster fans don't like Munster being forward dominated. But I think at times, the way the game has changed now, your attack shape in phase play right across the field has to be really good. And I think that's the next step where Munster need to go and give themselves a real shot of attacking teams. And there is no guarantee, no matter what happens in Munster in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, that they'll win a trophy, because trophies they're hard to come by. And it looks like Leinster they have a model now that's going to be, that all the other provinces are trying to reach that depth chart. And then in Europe, sometimes it's a roll of the dice. You're knocking on the door and you need a little bit of luck in the draw and stuff. So we'll just wait and see. Again, we're speculating a lot, but hopefully we can get some homegrown guys to take that next step. And maybe we'll see a little bit more of that throughout the rest of the season.
Matt, just to finish the Munster section, if it isn't a homegrown coach that takes the job, who else would you like to see that Munster go after or even interview, Matt?
It's a great question, Stu. I would agree with Quinny. Look, Munster's past, which was so successful, is part of their hindrance, in my opinion. Someone that's watched them for 25 years and coached against them at Leinster and Ulster. They were such a great club. Quinny's generation, I'm not saying this because Alan's here, but that was the great generation. So Munster keep looking back at that generation, so why can't we? And what they've got to do is change that and look forward and say, what can we become? And that's hard. That's really hard. So whoever it is, it can't be a rookie. It's got to be someone that's got scars of battle on them and understands what they're in for. You're going into one of the great clubs of Europe. They've got to change and look forward and do exactly what Alan said. They've got to produce attack. And the attack has to be original, has to be thoughtful. You don't lose those qualities that the great Munster sides had. Well, they were tough buggers. They're hard men. And they look really, really tough human beings, physically and mentally, and highly skillful. You've got to keep those qualities, that mindset, and build on it and take it forward. So I'm not going to throw a name up to you because the one bloke that would do that can't do it because he's signed in Japan, which is Michael Cheika. Chex would be absolutely brilliant at that. But he's moved his family to France, in where I am in Narbonne, and he's working a bit in Japan, so you're not going to get him. But someone along those lines that doesn't suffer fools gladly, has experience, is respectful of the club, knows their culture, but also can look and guide forward while keeping the past a close companion. But you can't go back to what Munster were. You never can go back. You just got to keep going forward. That's a hard gig. because winning's hard, mate. If winning was easy, one club would win it every year. And winning in Europe is really, really hard. That's what makes it such a